It's now more than a year that the war between Israel and Hamas began, and an end is nowhere in sight. For the people in the Gaza Strip, it's a humanitarian catastrophe. Support comes mainly through the hands of the UN Relief Agency in Gaza. For the Europe Conversation, I caught up with its director to talk about the situation that becomes increasingly precarious. Our guest today is Scott Anderson, Director of UNRWA Affairs in Gaza, that is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
So, the situation in Gaza has recently moved a bit to the back burner as there was so much going on elsewhere in the United States, in Europe. So bring us up to speed. What is the situation there right now?
The situation is very difficult for people on the ground. Conditions are quite dire. It's really become a small territory of two small territories, North and South Gaza, as we call it, across the Netzarim Junction, which divides it. In the north in particular, things are very difficult. The furthest north, we haven't been able to get food to those people for over a month. There's been an ongoing operation in Jabalia, Betanoun, Betlakia for over a month. Reportedly, somewhere between 1,300 and 1,800 people have died, and we think there's probably many more in the rubble. So it's very difficult. No little food, very little water, if any. And that's also what we face in the south as well. The most recent IPC report, which is a predictor of famine, shows that most people are in an emergency situation, which I don't find surprising, and that if we don't do something quickly, it could devolve into a full-blown famine, which would be a man-made condition, and something that could easily be corrected if we just get enough aid in to take care of everybody.
I want to come back to that famine problem later, but now I want to bring in the most recent controversy between your agency and Israel.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, the Knesset passed two laws that basically banned UNRWA from Israel and East Jerusalem. How does that affect your work in Gaza?
Well, right now, it hasn't affected it much at all, and we're very focused on the people that I talked about, the 2.2 million people of Gaza, and trying to make sure that all their basic needs are met. If the bill is fully implemented, it could certainly mean that UNRWA is no longer operational in Gaza. And that could have catastrophic consequences for the people on the ground who really would bear the brunt of that decision. As an example, UNRWA does 2/3 of all primary care medical consultations in Gaza. That's between 16,000 and 17,000 daily. And that includes vaccinations for children, insulin for diabetics, hypertension drugs for people that have high blood pressure. If we're unable to operate, unable to continue bringing that aid in, that just all stops. And I said that would have potentially catastrophic situations for the people on the ground.
Maybe as an information for our viewers, it's not only healthcare that you're providing. UNRWA also provides humanitarian aid, education, and other services. By cooperating with the local government authority, which is Hamas, a terrorist organization in the eyes of the European Union, how do you manage that?
So first, we don't cooperate with them. There is a United Nations instruction that dates back to 2009. It's a no-contact policy, and what it does allow is technical cooperation. And that could mean things like we recently did a polio vaccination campaign in Gaza. The United Nations did. UNRWA played a large role in that with over 40% of the vaccinations. But we do coordinate with the Ministry of Health because there's no other way you can reasonably implement. Similarly, we do coordinate when we do education with the Ministry of Education, but it is coordination, it's not cooperation, because of the reasons that you've said, including the way the UN views Hamas. So it's a very delicate act. We have to make very clear when we do meet these people, the conditions under which we're meeting. So it's, I just want to be, very clear, it's not necessarily full cooperation, it is coordination to make sure that we're meeting the basic needs of people. And we are very careful to adhere to the guidance that the UN and other member states have put forward.
There is, of course, the widespread belief in Israel that UNRWA is not neutral, that it's too close to the Palestinians and Hamas, that some of the Hamas terrorists on October of last year were actually UNRWA employees. How do you respond charges like that?
Our Commissioner General, when he was informed of this, he took very swift action back in January. All the cases were referred to the UN headquarters in New York. The Office of Internal Oversight undertook the investigation on behalf of the UN, and the contracts of those staff were terminated. So where we are given evidence of staff misconduct, be it any kind of misconduct, we undertake swift investigations and we undertake swift action, as the Commissioner General did, to terminate those contracts in the interest of the agency, and those people are no longer employed with us.
Yeah, I remember there were also Israeli charges that UNRWA facilities were being used to house Hamas terrorists, armament caches, and administrative headquarters. In response, your agency took action to weed out Hamas terrorists from among your employees. But can you say today that UNRWA has thrown out all Hamas operatives?
Well, no, I don't think anybody could say anything with certainty about any of their workforce anywhere. We have over 13,000 people. We do take the neutrality very seriously, as shown by the Commissioner General's very swift action. But no, I can't with certainty say that's done. I don't have evidence of more. I can say that. And if we did, we would take action. But no, we can't with certainty say that. That would be incorrect of us to do.
Okay. A few days ago, the Famine Review Committee, which is part of a UN structure that monitors the global hunger and food security, called the situation in northern Gaza, and I quote, extremely grave and rapidly deteriorating. It called on all actors in the war and those who have influence on these actors to take immediate action within days, not weeks. Now, have you seen any activity following this warning? Do you see that people are willing to improve the situation or not?
I do think that Israel is trying to improve the situation. I think that perhaps we're not doing enough, given the findings of the Famine Committee, and that there is a significant possibility that there are famine-like conditions that exist in North Gaza. We've gone through this before, unfortunately, in the north, where we were trying to feed the north from the south, and it just didn't work for a variety of reasons. So with a lot of advocacy from the UN and from member states, we were able to get a crossing open from the north for the north. So we very much hope that we can start getting food to people again that are very much in need, and prevent would be a man-made famine from occurring in the north.
Now, as we speak, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, on Lebanon, continue. There are so-called safe zones in Gaza where people can go, but these zones are very often unsafe zones or even full. Yeah. Give us a full picture here. What is the situation?
Well, there's nowhere safe in Gaza. That's been said by many people. I would echo that.
Including the safe zones.
Including the safe zones. There's been strikes and bombings in the safe zone. I visited Nasser Hospital after that had happened. You walk into the emergency room, you can quite literally smell blood in the air, and there's no disinfectant to clean the floors. There's not suitable supplies to take care of the patients. I've talked to doctors that work for medical international NGOs, and they say, the likelihood of infection if you go to a hospital is 100%, because they're just not clean to a standard that we would accept. And unfortunately, all parties to the conflict are not respecting the sanctity of sites that should be safe for civilians, which includes hospitals and includes schools, both UNRWA and PA schools. And we would reiterate that call that all parties to the conflict respect the sanctity of those places so that civilians can find safety for themselves and for their families.
In this town, in Brussels, a lot of people think, what can the European Union do to improve the situation or help? Yeah. I give that question to you.
I mean, I'm here talking to the European Union. I've done a couple briefings today, and the European Union has a lot of member states, and they do have influence politically. They have significant influence politically, globally, including in Israel. And I do think that their voices will be heard if they ask for improvements in the situation, as the U.S. government has done. And I think the more people that are asking and the more requests that Israel gets, I think the more seriously they would take it. So that was the message I had for the European Union. We need funding to continue for UNRWA and all the other humanitarian partners on the ground. because the needs are only growing more, they're not lessening, and I don't see that situation changing anywhere in the near future.
Are you sure about the European influence?
I do believe that, yeah. We have a bloc of many countries. If they speak with one voice, I think it carries weight. And when they have spoken, one of the initial readings of the Knesset bill that we talked about earlier was going to declare UNRWA a terrorist organization. The European Union spoke very strongly against that, and it was removed. So I do believe that they have influence. I believe they are listened to, and they're still a very important player in global politics.
You told me earlier that you have, as I understand, regular talks with the IDF, with the Israeli Defense Forces. Can you tell us a bit how these talks look like, and what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think the talks are respectful and friendly. I first came to Gaza in 2008, and I know a lot of the people that work in the IDF and COGAT in particular since then. And it's a relationship of mutual respect and trust. And what we're discussing is we both want the same thing. Perhaps we want to achieve it differently, but we both want the same thing, which is to alleviate the suffering of civilians in Gaza. Right? That's what COGAT exists for, is to help make that happen. That's why the UN is there. And what we're trying to do in these conversations is figure out solutions to the challenges that we both face. Sometimes there's not an easy solution. We'll agree to disagree on the best way to approach it. But I do think that's what we're all trying to strive for, is how do we get more aid to the civilian population in Gaza, while we hope very soon there's a ceasefire to the larger conflict, the hostages can go home to their families, and we can finally start to rebuild Gaza.
All right, Scott Anderson, Director of UNRWA in the Gaza Strip. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much.